How's it going, everybody? Emperor John Kill 3D Gaming here with another video, and I've actually been waiting for the opportunity to get a chance to play this demo, the Resident Evil Village demo. Now, the demo at the main menu, it's like two separate things you can choose from. You can basically choose the castle or the village. Now, I'm going to get into both, but I want to say this. Everyone on my channel knows how much I love Resident Evil, and I know that Resident Evil 7 and 8 is, though different in their own way, to go in a different direction. Like, mainly this type of like first person and more grit came into Resident Evil 7, where it's going into more of a different direction. And then we've had the remakes of 2 and 3 to give people their original Resident Evil vibe, but with the controls of Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. So Resident Evil is kind of 50-50 right now, and they're also trying to dive into multiplayer, which, yes, I'm one of the very few people that actually like Resistance, and I'm gonna give RE-verse a chance, because Resident Evil, like I've always said, could work in multiplayer if done right. And I understand all Resident Evil fans, including myself, we want a remake of Outbreak, where we can play a multiplayer Resident Evil campaign, you know, fighting zombies again, going through Raccoon City. But for now, as a fan, I'm trying to remain open as possible. Now, there are a lot of ups with where the direction has been going and a lot of downs. Now, to talk about 8, let me talk a little bit about 7. I played 7, I grew to like it. At first, I thought, okay, this is not Resident Evil, but then when it slowly started to open up, it was Resident Evil. It tied within the universe. Where you think it was a reboot, it wasn't. Now, this is where, in Resident Evil 8, but after playing this demo, okay, I can see the themes they're going with. I can see the type of world they're going with. I can see how they're using influences from actual mythological monsters in the region that it's set in. And that kind of makes me a little guilty, because Resident Evil, that's not what Resident Evil was about. You know, they tried to go into the supernatural a couple times. I believe so, or no. They tried to go into the supernatural, but that became its own IP in Devil May Cry, way back when. But here, Resident Evil Village feels like if you were to take Resident Evil 4, put it in first person, and make it scary. Now, drawing from Resident Evil 4 is not a bad thing. It's not. The environments themselves here look like nowhere we've been. Even if you can compare it to the villages that you fight through in Resident Evil 4, this still looks very unique and different to the region that it is set in. And mind you, what you're seeing now, this is without the PS4 Pro settings turned on, and the game runs like Resident Evil 7 did. Resident Evil 7 ran pretty well on all platforms, even on the base platforms, before they got their upgrades. Now, I don't know how this is going to run on PS5. It might, because if I'm buying it, I'm smart. Here's a little tip to everybody. Buy this on PS4 so you don't pay the $70, because this PS4 version will turn into the PS5 version upon transferring it over. Anyway, this game, though, from its mechanics, from what I'm getting here, the vibe of the demo, of the two stages, or not 2 stages, but these stages are pretty extensive. I like the village portion a little bit more than the castle portion, because the castle portion, I guess probably this was a different part of the castle, different section of the castle, and from other people's experiences, I don't know if there's different outcomes in this demo, because I've watched people play the demos before, and I'm doing something that's complete. I've had different encounters and things that I didn't even recognize. Like, if you remember how people have played the demo, and you know the little ring that you get inside the castle to open the door, usually something you were supposed to get out the front, and the big tall vampire Lady Demetria was supposed to grab you, but no, here it ended differently. I didn't get grabbed, and the door was in a different location. So I'm wondering, is the base game, is this what they did with the demo? Is the demo supposed to just, I get it, demo's going to give you an idea, but before we get back more to the castle portion, there's actually one thing I want to talk about. The enemy types. When I was playing, I was seeing something move through this grass area, kind of like Jeepers Creepers, and I thought it was crazy that they're trying to include a lichen type werewolf creature. But after trying to encounter one of these things, I'm like, okay, I can see why these things are threatening, and I looked close enough. Like, I didn't get a chance to record the portion or get the screenshot, but I've had some screenshots like that I screen captured, and I'm looking closely. Or I used the photo mode. I pressed pause, used the photo mode, and I zoomed in to look and see that these things, they look supernatural, but when you zoom in, they have biological traits going through them. Because if this was like a pure lichen werewolf, he would be a werewolf, which would make it look stupid. But in the Resident Evil comics, in the old school comics, there was a werewolf before the events of the game. If you want to know where that's from, be sure to check out a really good Resident Evil YouTuber called ScorePN. You're welcome, Score. He is one of the reasons why I'm learning newer things. Like, there's things about the mythos that I did not know about. I went by what the game said and some expanded material, but I've learned what I've played in and out. Now, the enemy types of the lichens, I don't know how many enemy types there are, but I'll tell you what this. You face the lichens in this demo, and you face these, I don't know what to call them. They look like zombies. Now, I don't know if they're zombies per se, but these things use weapons. Now, you probably wonder, well, John, in Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6, enemies use weapons. Yes, but they use them in a precise manner. They were using the weapons in a manner that was to attack you with a form of intelligence. It's scarier to fight something that has a weapon that doesn't give a shit about itself. It just wants to kill you. Because at least in some of the other games, yes, the enemies would throw their lives at you, but some of them at least would duck behind cover to give themselves some self-preservation. It scares me more when the enemy knows he's gonna fucking die, or it knows it's gonna die, and it's still coming for me. Because one of these revenants, I was playing in the basement section. I don't know how I got there. I just know I ran through a room and I fell down a hole, and I ended up in where you see in the trailers a dungeon, a prison dungeon. And in this prison dungeon, I fought these, I'm gonna just call them revenants, because that's what they look like, revenants. All cloaked up revenant druids, but they look like zombies. They act like zombies. They move like zombies. Not the traditional stumbling T-virus zombies, but these guys move like something you would see akin to Day of the Dead, where they're swinging their arms around while they're moving, or the Walking Dead zombies. They're more akin to those, but not in appearance. In appearance, they look very different than the average zombie. These things look bloodless. I mean, when you shoot them, blood comes out, but that's the best example I can think about it. They look truly like soulless creatures, and they're using swords, axes, flails, whatever weapon I saw in the dark, because I could barely see, because they do a real good job. I give it this. It does a real good job of you wanting to go out and see the environment, explore the environment. Of course, there's going to be puzzles. There was just maybe one or two puzzles here, but Resident Evil has been cranking down its puzzles, because I can see how us Resident Evil fans, we don't give a damn about the puzzles, whether it's hard, easy, or none. It's what makes Resident Evil Resident Evil. But puzzles, I think in a Resident Evil game at this point, I think they should come up with something different to do with puzzles instead of just getting this piece, take it over there, take it over there, take it over there. Now, don't get me wrong, Resident Evil has backtracking. 7 had backtracking, this had backtracking, but this feels like it's going to have a lot more, but it might be more rewarding. And what do I mean by this? Where in Resident Evil 7, you basically go out, you basically go through the compound, the whole Louisianian compound of the Bakers. It didn't feel, when you think about it, it really wasn't an oversized big map. It was really just the house, the basement of the house, the caves, what the hell is this guy's name? The psychopathic son, whatever the fuck, Luke, yeah, Lucas's little stadium of death inside the barn. And then after that, you come back, and then you fight, oh no, the ship with Mia. You have the ship section, but those weren't really too big and too open. Everything still felt closed. But I get that, because when something's enclosed and there's enemies coming after you, you know, that's not going to go good. But I think this game is going to answer the one of the criticisms from 7 is lack of enemy types. Because from what I've seen in the previews and from what I've seen, I've only encountered 2 enemy types so far. And that's too many from Resident Evil 7. So, I wonder, what are we really in for? And I want to know one thing. I know this is not the vision that original Resident Evil fans have. Hell, this wasn't the direction I expected to go. But I'm thinking, would you rather have something new and different, or something that would eventually be called stale, like the modern era Resident Evils were becoming? And what I mean by modern was when it started with Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 came out, it was a huge hit. 5, hit or miss, depending on your point of view. 6 is where everybody got tired. Then the spin-off games did their best to revitalize Resident Evil, at least kept the traction afloat. Then we got hit with Resident Evil 2's remake. That's what sent Resident Evil back up to the top. Like, Resident Evil 7 came out, yes, it took us by storm. I'm sorry I left that part out for a second. Resident Evil 7 is what revitalized interest, but 2 is what put the franchise back in the map, in the heart of fans, mainly. Now, I think they're going to remake more games, potentially, but I do want to see now where these new iterations go, because yes, I'm kind of glad that they're doing something that distances themselves from Resident Evil 6, like what 7 did. And I'm a fan of mythical monsters, basically, being in video games. But this time, I wonder if there's a twist that these things are not supernatural, that these things are biological with a supernatural element that's keeping them shaded. Because I've been watching people do these videos trying to tell you, where did these creatures come from? What's the basis and the origins for the characters and monsters that Capcom is including in this game? And I feel that taking monsters from an actual mythology and trying to craft something around them can add a level of horror, because you can't tell if they're really the real deal. Like, best way I can example is the real monster from the myth. Let's say if you're coming across an actual werewolf and then you see the werewolf in this game, you know what a werewolf looks like, but then when you see one of these lichens, you're like, is that thing really a werewolf, or is that fucking thing something different, just whatever's wrong with it, like whatever virus is inside of him or biological issue is making him act and look like a werewolf? Because from what I'm telling you now, these lichens are going to not creep me the fuck out, but these lichens will be a very big threat. And I saw, he wasn't in this demo, but there's this enemy type that looks like a lichen as well, but he's holding a giant hammer. Like, there's so many things that the demo really changed compared to the other demos I've seen being played. And I just, again, don't know if it's tailored from experience to experience. So I didn't have the experience of Lady Demistraskill grabbing me and saying, what she said in the thing, and poking my ass with those fucking Weapon X gloves she's got right there. But what I'm going to tell you, I think what Resident Evil 8 is going to... I know I sound like I'm going back and forth off the track, but I'm doing this right as I finished playing this demo. So I wanted to give my fresh thoughts and fresh things, how I feel and what I've experienced. And what I have to say is, I think this is gonna be the game that splits Resident Evil again down the middle. But in what fashion? Will it have a negative repercussion, or will it have people be shocked, but then they'll be more open to it as it goes along? Because there's a lot of this that it feels like Resident Evil. That's the one thing I still can wholeheartedly say. It still feels like it has the soul. But the soul of Resident Evil has been changed so many times, new iterations. Hell, I'm waiting for Capcom. They should just do, for example, one more remake of Resident Evil 1, but then give it the RE engine treatment and with the controls of 2 and 3 remake. I think that right there would shock the hell out of people and make people be like, okay, Capcom knows that they messed up with Resident Evil 3's remake by lack of content. Hell, I think Resident Evil 8 here is supposed to be an answer to that. And I can't judge, like I said, I can't judge RE-verse, but I'm open to it. Like I said, I keep a low expectation. See, here's the tip for everybody. This is how I review things and how I look into things like this. Even though I'm a fan of the Resident Evil franchise, I'm also a fan of the Mortal Kombat franchise, whatever franchise I'm a fan of, fans automatically build an expectation because they know the license behind it. What I do, and what I continue to do, and what I've done with these recent Resident Evil games is, even if I know something might be good, I turn my expectations off with everything. I go into everything with no expectation. And someone even told me, it's like, I've never heard of someone doing like that. Like one of my podcasters, like, that's a unique way of looking into something. Because here's the kicker. You're building your expectation as you're going along, as the game goes along. So I can understand the concern from hardcore Resident Evil fans and newcomers that are coming into the series, because a lot of Resident Evil fans, newer ones, are coming in from the remakes, RE7 and now RE8. So what I'm thinking RE8 should do, and what it continues to do from Resident Evil 7, it's continuing the horror, the survival horror, item management, you know, having to manage what supplies you have left when it comes to either herbs, when it comes to key items, when it comes to bullets, when it comes to finding weapons. I can tell this game will still have a lot of exploratory areas for you to get caught going off the beaten path. And by what I heard, that there will be multiple objectives besides doing the story mission, that you can do different objectives to help you explore, gather materials, gather new weapons. And you know what? That's actually, I think if that's true, then that is something that is really good. Instead of doing the main objective, if you're not ready for it, it's almost RPG-ish in a sense, but not really, because, you know, there's no level up bars in Resident Evil. There's no kind of leveling up, traditional level up system. Resident Evil, how you level up is how you power up your guns, powering up your stamina, powering up your health, and having as much ammunition as possible. Whether that be finding it off dead enemies, finding it in barrels, breaking stuff. You know, damn, this is starting to sound more like Resident Evil 4. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's hard to talk about this game because something about this game, it just gives me Resident Evil 4 vibes. It's basically the horror game, the horror Resident Evil that fans were asking for the first time. Now, by my understanding, Resident Evil 4 is getting a remake, and that remake is going to make it more horrific, like just basically taking the original game, throwing it in the RE engine, and making it more horrific, which is fine. I want to see where that goes, but I'm still remaining optimistic about that, and I'm still remaining optimistic when I play this game, because this will be one of the games that I will be able to hopefully get on launch day and spend the weekend streaming it for you guys, and we'll all experience this together and figure out what's our opinion. So, from the opinions of everyone else, I've discussed how other people feel or what this could mean for Resident Evil. Where do I stand on Resident Evil Village? Like, to me, Resident Evil Village, I think it's going to be a sleeper hit. And what I mean by that, traditional RE fans will have their gripes because an RE fan knows what they want. You know, and I respect that. I respect where RE fans, hardcore ones, are coming from. That feel like this is this their Resident Evil? Saying this is not their Resident Evil, but they're still going to go into it with a level of curiosity. I think if it keeps its survival horror elements intact, its old creepy environments, you know, keeping the vibe of enemies, and hell, even if the dialogue is silly, because no matter how horrific these games are, the dialogue is silly. But I think that is a staple of Resident Evil at this point. Bad dialogue, questionable story. Now that's one thing. That is the thing I am going to question the most. What is the story here, Capcom? Because you see Chris Redfield is almost the villain this time. But why is Chris Redfield... See, now let me get into a theory. Let me close this video off, this last length of the video, with a theory of mine. It is with one of my favorite Resident Evil characters, Chris Redfield. Chris Redfield showed up at the end of the last game to save you. But from all the promotion material and even a picture, which is the application image of this game, it shows Chris's face. But it also shows half of his face with the design of a lichen. So I'm thinking, is Chris truly evil? Is Chris truly the evil being or being evil like people might think he is. No, because that does not, I don't think that, because that's not Chris Redfield. Something would have to have happened to Chris to put him in such a circumstance where he's either being forced to do this against his will, or he truly probably have gone insane. So my theory on what's happening in this game is Chris is being forced to. You know, like Wesker forced Jill to work for him while she was under mind control. I'm thinking Chris could be infected with the lichen virus, or whatever they call it in this game, like whatever the infection is, whatever the biological threat, whatever the BLWs are going to be, anything. I question that. Because if this game was just, if you took Resident Evil, the license of Resident Evil off, made a wholly original horror game out of this, I think it would have been received. It would be received better, and I think it would be held with open arms. But the fact that it carries a prominent name like Resident Evil, Capcom, you really should, I hope you know what you're doing. That's all I'm going to tell you, Capcom. Because I went into Resident Evil 7 with skepticism up the gang. Still turned off my expectations, and I came out shocked and surprised. You know, and it's one of my favorite titles in the Resident Evil series. Obviously, my favorite one is now always going to be behind the original Resident Evil remake from the GameCube that they brought over to the PS4 and all other platforms. Was after that comes Resident Evil 2's remake. You know, Resident Evil 2 remake and the RE1 remake are my top ones, and this one follows right behind those. Because, ironically, if I was also to place Resident Evil 4 would be in 4th place. So, because, I mean, I love the game, but it is overrated. It's not the be-all, end-all of Resident Evil that people thought it was. But, I just really want you, Capcom, to have really went into this game, took what you learned from Resident Evil 7, take the faults of Resident Evil 7, because yes, there was plenty of faults, and fix that here. And by what I've seen, by what I've played, even though I'm questioning the level design, because everyone knows when it comes to Resident Evil and its level design, you expect open areas, you expect backtracking up the ass. Here, I can see that, but there's a lot of confined rooms. But I get that's also to continue to build the horror and the tension. Because when I came into a room with these revenant creatures, and there wasn't that much mobility, I really had to think, do I just run or do I put them all down? And knowing my gung-ho mentality, I'm going to want to put them down. But Resident Evil mentality says, sit your ass back, pick them off one by one, or get around them. But when I can see these enemies are going to be more like farming type of enemies. They're not that hard to take down. Maybe a few well-placed, a couple well-placed headshots will put them down. Body shots will slow them down. So if you were to do it like this, 2 to the body, 1 to the head. That's the best way I could tell you to do it. If you see those 2 shots not putting down that Revenant, pop right in the head and I guarantee they're going to go down. And this time you can actually block, which is another thing. I don't remember if Resident Evil 7 had blocking, or if it did, it didn't work too well. But this one, the block, even though you have to be fast to do it, the blocking in this one actually does lower the amount of damage you get. It's not just a window dressing mechanic. You really do feel protected when you do it, even when you're taking a fucking blade or a sickle to the head. So, and the enemies such as Lady Dimitrescu, the rumor is that she's gonna work like Mr. X and Nemesis, chasing you throughout the castle. Capcom, I think I know what you did here. Now let me be funny for a second. Capcom, I think you know the old saying, hell has no fury like a woman's scorn, and clearly Lady Dimitrescu as a fucking scorn towards you for escaping. But why are you gonna make her thick? That's all I gotta say. Somebody from fucking Pixar is working, like, what is it, Pixar, DreamWorks, whoever, that makes those animated moms have giant ass asses and tits and thighs. I wonder if one of them, you got them to work on this game right here, because it sure as hell feels like it. But anyway, Resident Evil 8's Village, the demo, and that's another thing, quick side note. It says 8 in the title in Roman numerals, but people say, no, this is not Resident Evil 8, it's just called Resident Evil Village. Okay, look, when it says it right there. When it says Resident Evil Village, you can see it in Roman numerals, that it says 8. What is so hard? Like, that's not rocket science. It's not fucking rocket science. It says Resident Evil 8 Village. Village is just the subtitle. If that was the case, this game would just be called Village, or just be called Resident Evil Village. But there is an emphasis. Just because it doesn't say number 8, that doesn't mean it's not number 8. The 8 is in the Roman numerals, and if it's in the Roman numerals or within the letter in the word Village itself, as long as those are there, I will address this game as Resident Evil 8 Village. Because I've seen people, you got some, and I'm not saying all, but some, some bougie fans of the franchise, they're trying to say, well, it's Resident Evil Village. I don't see 8. And I'm not saying like Dreamcast Kai saying it's not Resident Evil 8, it's just called Village. Well, that is Dreamcast Kai, known for clickbait. Anyway, that's all I gotta say about this. I'm still remaining skeptical and open, but if you're a hardcore Resident Evil fan, go with this. Take what I say with a grain of salt. My experience will obviously not be the same as yours. Everyone has their own experiences, how they're going to handle and take this game as a fan. So that's up to you to decide. But my first impressions of the demo, I am interested, but I'm also keeping my reservations. I'm going to play the game to give my full opinion on it myself. So, I hope you all enjoyed the video. This is Emperor Junkyard 3D Gaming. Be sure to like, subscribe, favorite, hit the bell notification, and I'll catch you all next time.